Welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on the 68 Shelby GT500. Going to start prepping the tops of the inner fender aprons for the rust repair that needs to be done there. Pretty typical where the two panels overlap that they start rusting. I'm sure if you have a Mustang and your car is in places where we get rust, you've seen this. So let's get started. And here they are, the typical inner apron rust outs that we so commonly see on these early Mustangs. What I'm doing with these repairs is basically I'm going to pick at them, meaning going to slowly open them up and see exactly how bad they are. As you can see, I'll pry back the old sheet metal to reveal what's underneath. It's not looking very promising. So generally what I try to do is save as much of the original sheet metal as I possibly can, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case on this car. There's extensive rust in between these two panels, and to leave any of those original panels behind would only invite more rust after the repair was done. Now with that sheet metal removed and all those pieces of rust out, you can see clearly a hole that was created in that lower structure. I'm going to have to cut all this out and replace it with good metal. Right now I'm going to punch through these spot welds and try to get back to a place where I feel good about cutting and tying in new metal. At this point I've found the proper spot where I wanted to tie in my new metal. So I'm going to cut back this panel, clean it, go through, clean up some of the spot welds. After things are cleaned up, I'm going to look for a place to make my cuts to remove that rusted through panel, and then I will leave flanges to better support the new piece of steel I'm going to weld in position to replace what I've removed. Now you'll notice on these spots, I cut out all the areas that were rusty. If I were to just, say, clean this panel up and leave it in place, there's no way I could get all that rust out of there. Even it would eventually come back and create another rust issue. I'm going to put in new pieces in there, welding them to these, and then cleaning these sections down the best as I can. I'll wire wheel them and use a chemical to eat away any rust, and then put the new pieces in. Use a weld through primer underneath in between each patch panel that I put in place to help ensure that this doesn't happen again. I'll also come in from behind, put seam sealer in to close these seams up where Ford never did, which created this issue. First step is to take a wire wheel and knock off any loose rust that might be left behind from removal of those rusted out inner fender pieces. Next, I'm going to take my flapper disc, grind down any of the paint, any of the heavier rust that might be there, try to make the surface as clean as I can without getting the metal too thin. What I'm going to use to treat these areas is PR15 metal prep. You can see I took the flap grinder, it's a 60 grit sanding disc, and cleaned the paint off. But obviously you can see these dark spots. You can grind and grind and grind, and eventually you'll get rid of them, but you'll be left with so little metal that you won't have anything as far as substance in the structure left. So what I will do is treat these darker areas with that PR15. Same goes over here. You can see the shiny metal is the clean metal. The darker stuff still has rust embedded deep inside of it. That PR15 will basically render the rust inert and make it safe to put panels back on again, and hopefully ensure that no more rust will return. In the instructions it says to keep the surface wet for
30 minutes, inspect the parts every 30 minutes. So basically what I'm going to have to do is come back and respray this every so often to make sure the surface stays wet. I'm not going to bore you with that, but I'm going to get started here. What the PR15 is supposed to do is to turn the rust into like a zinc oxide finish. I can see that starting to happen. That's not done yet. But it's getting there. I can still see the brown. I can see some of it where it does look like it's turned to zinc oxide, which would be like a black finish.
The treatment with the PR15 is finished, so now we're going to move on to fabbing up the patch panels for these upper aprons. Now that the patches are fabricated, we're going to weld them in and make them one with the structure. With the welding complete, I'm going to go over and grind down the welds so that they are as flush as they can be with the other panels. Then I'm going to follow up with a hammer and dolly, as you see here, to try to flatten everything out best that I can. More grinding, more hammer and dolly. You get the idea.
At this point, the pieces that are welded to the shock tower are in position. I ground and smoothed them down and also dollied them with the hammer and dolly. You can see that in the video. Try to get them as flat as possible. I ended up beveling the edges here and here like they would be from the factory, and then ground smooth so they would meet flush with the existing sheet metal. Make a nice repair.
Now I'm going to fabricate the patches that attach to the front and rear aprons. These will then be plug welded into the lower patches that I installed on the shock tower apron. As you can see, there's a lot of test fitting, trimming, and test fitting going back and forth, trimming the panel, fitting it, trimming it, fitting it. You get the idea. It's a long process in order to get these patches to fit correctly. At this point, I'm putting dots on the repair panels to mark where I'm going to drill for the plug welds. Here I'm drilling 1/4-inch holes through the patch panel that will be used for the plug welding. The holes are drilled uneven and ununiform to mimic the original spot welding. One final test fit to make sure everything lines up properly. This is the weld-through primer I'll be using. Always be sure to use it in a well-ventilated area, or you could get as high as Gary Busey on a cocaine binge.
Talk about buttered sausage, where it comes from, what it does, why is it doing what it's doing, get it out of my face. Buttered sausage. It's not my jam, I don't buy jam, I buy honey, and I kiss it on the lips.
Here I'm going to spray several light coats at a time of the weld-through primer onto the aprons. Then I'm going to spray each repair panel on the front and back sides, making sure to get nice even coats on each piece. Here I'll do the final positioning before I start tacking each patch panel into place. Here I'm going to start doing the plug welding. These are the welds that really hold the whole assembly together and give the strength that you need to get back in the front end after removing and replacing the original pieces. You can see I start in the center of the hole and work my way out in a circular motion to the edge of the hole. This builds a puddle in the center which will flow out and bond both panels together. Plug welding does replicate the original spot welding to a point, but if this were a concourse car, I would definitely use a spot welder instead of this method to more accurately replicate what was done originally at the factory. Using the C-clamp is also a very important part of the process. Helps keep the metal as tightly together as it possibly can to eliminate the possibility of any gaps in between the two panels. I'll hit it one more time with the 60 grit flap disc to knock down all the high spots.
You can see we have it all ground down now, pretty much where it needs to be. These sort of mimic the original spot welds, but probably a lot more stronger since they are plug welds. A little bit of body work on the edges here and here to clean things up, make it a little better. Hit it with some primer, and then it'll be ready for when we clean the rest of the engine compartment down and paint everything. Not only does the repair need to be aesthetically pleasing, it needs to be functional as well and strength. This is all part of the car, holding the car together. Proper thickness of sheet metal, the plug welds, everything tying it all together makes it a good, strong structural weld. That'll do it for going over the repair work done on the upper aprons of the 68 Shelby GT500. Stay tuned, we have more repair work to go. Obviously we have to change the whole floor out yet, so that's going to be exciting. Not really. But anyway, I'll have a few more videos coming up showing the repair before the car gets the floor done, so stay tuned. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to the channel.